Pam, you say we have a quorum?
Correct.
Okay, noting that I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'm acting in the stead of Commissioner Cupriel Comas, who is out of town. And I also want to acknowledge that our commissioners are with us on Microsoft Teams today, so welcome. I'd like to start by calling for a motion and a second to grant leave of absences to Commissioners Koba, Cupriel Comas, and O'Halloran, who are out of town.
So moved.
Second.
Fantastic. Pam, could I ask you to please walk us through a roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader. Not present. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, so noted. Thank you. And next, I'd like to call for a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the regular commission meeting of September 14th.
So moved. Second.
Great, thank you. Pam, would you please administer the roll call?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader. Thank you.
So noted, thank you. All right, and now Curtis, I invite you to administer and provide us with the executive director's report.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, good morning. Really nice to see you all, even if it's virtually. I do want to appreciate your willingness to have this meeting virtually. We're accommodating a visit by the head of the Economic Development Administration today. She's Assistant Secretary Alejandra Castillo, and we're also having our two United States senators in our commission room here in an hour, and I just really appreciate your flexibility. They're here today to talk about the next steps and the regional impact in the EDA's awarding of our Mass Timber Coalition's $41 million grant to grow the mass timber industry and really help increase statewide housing production, as we've talked about over the past several months. The project down at Terminal 2 is very exciting, is underway already with our partners at Hacienda CDC, and just really excited to host that session today. So again, appreciate your flexibility. I do also want to note we are just slightly slow getting started here because commission officers and the executive team were down with our new employees. They are currently following along on the Port's YouTube channel. I'll just note it's a super impressive bunch. Diverse and interesting. They're all around the Port, and we're just lucky to have them and look forward to having them part of the Port family here going forward. I would also like to acknowledge the Port's safety champions. I believe, here we go. They are coming up on the screen now. You'll see, again, 4 employees from different parts of the Port really stepping into the space to make the Port a safe place to be, to work, a place where you go home as well or better than when you arrived at work. And I'm just really grateful to them to continue our focus on safety. To further that point, Stan Waters, would you join please for a safety moment today?
Sure, thanks, Curtis. My message today discusses emergency preparedness for work and home. This October, Fire Prevention Week and the Great Shakeout are consecutive weeks. Fire prevention and earthquake drills enjoy regular discussion and resiliency planning efforts in the workplace, and now it is time to bring safety home using these emphasis campaigns and resources. This week is Fire Prevention Week. Since 1922, or 100 years, the National Fire Protection Association has sponsored Fire Prevention Week, which is the longest running public health observance in our country. The purpose of Fire Prevention Week is to bring awareness to the risk of death in the case of fire and provide educational resources to people of all ages, races, and socioeconomic status to keep everyone safe. Each year focuses on a different element of fire safety, such as Fire won't wait. Plan and practice your escape. Test your smoke alarms. Maintain batteries in proper function per manufacturer's recommendations. Obtain and learn how to use portable fire extinguishers for places of concern. And then examine places fires could start for hazards, such as your kitchen, laundry, garage, space heaters. Next week, join the port and over 500,000 other Oregon participants in the Great Oregon Shakeout earthquake drill on October 20th. Millions of people worldwide will practice how to drop, cover, and hold on at 10:20 a.m. on October 20th. Oregonians can join the event by registering their family or organization to be prepared to survive and recover quickly from big earthquakes wherever you live, work, or travel. By participating, you can learn tips on how to get 2 weeks ready and craft your own emergency kits for home and your autos. Curtis, that's my message today.
Terrific. Thanks, Stan. Really appreciate it. I love the 1020. Moving on here, just one more item for you, commissioners. We are moving through the PDX Next milestones here, and I want to point it out and just acknowledge the heavy lift, literally and figuratively, that's been going into it over the last month or so. You'll hear later in this meeting from Vince Granato, and I believe he's going to share with you a video that we're sharing with employees and the public this week about just the mass timber roof and the structure and the work and contribution of community that's gone into that. But last week, the PDX Next team successfully installed the last of these giant steel roof modules over the existing terminal. And with that milestone, and honestly, just a ton of hard work and late nights over the past 6 weeks, the team has completed the most challenging and riskiest part of the project. And this is where I kind of want to knock wood, or don't even want to say it. Don't want to be superstitious, or as my 10-year-old would say, superstitious. It's really an incredible feat of engineering and construction, and one that has simply never been done before. And you all know how much we've prioritized safety in this project and at the port, and I'm really proud of the team that they've completed the milestone safely, and really am looking forward to the next steps. So again, you'll hear more about it today, but it is a pretty big moment for us as we think about what comes next and moving the rest of these roof pieces into place. So with that, Mr. President, I am completed with my comments. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Curtis. Are there any questions or comments from Commission? Okay, hearing none, I would call for a motion and a second for approval of the Executive Director's report. Pam, would you be, I'm sorry, let me allow the motion a second.
Second motion. Oh, so second.
All right, thank you. Pam, would you walk us through the roll call?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and I don't see Commissioner Strader. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And now we will move on to the public comment portion of the agenda. And I know that we had one request for public comment, and Pam is our
Yes,
guest here
he
online.
is. Mm-hmm.
And sir, please bear with me. I'm going to try my very best to correctly pronounce your name, but I hope you'll afford me some grace if I'm off. But we have a request for public comment from Alexei Bergazov. Is that close?
It's correct. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. All right, sir, please, the mic is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us here. So our names are Elena and Alexei Bergazov, and we live in Southwest Portland, Ash Creek area, residing here since 1996, so a couple of decades now. And all these years, we never felt that we were on the flight path. And a couple years ago, we noticed a drastic change. So now it feels like planes are flying all the time over our area and creating significant noise pollution. So we started our research because it started creating all kind of problems. We lack of sleep, all day long. I've been working from home since 2016 and never had this issue before. And now it's just hard to concentrate during the daytime and hard to fall asleep and wake up frustrated as well. So all day is going on like this from early morning to late night. Weekends, holidays, there's no break from it. So we started researching this, and we found that all kind of airplanes are flying over our area. There are passenger, cargo, private, Aero Academy, military services, some kind of services we can see, and helicopters. So all kind of aircraft is here. And it feels like we are made an intersection from 4 different directions, either west to east, east to west, and south to north and back, and southwest to northeast. So it feels like we are the hub here. So to address the problem, we contacted first Port of Portland Noise Management, and it was interesting that they referred us to the Federal Aviation Agency because of the flight path. They said they don't control the flight path. So we contacted the FAA and they referred us back to the local airport. So it was like a vicious circle back and forth. And then we ended up at the Citizen Noise Advisory Committee at the Port of Portland. So we attended a couple meetings. And at the initial meeting, we presented our issue and we were promised that a letter could be written by the noise management to the FAA about the issue. But at the second meeting, we were told that this is not going to be taken any further. So there was a stop at that point, but we still need help. The issue has been intensifying. We are seeing more airplanes, different kinds, newer, we didn't see before. So it's just a growing issue. So we are seeking further help, and hopefully that this venue here, the Board of Commissioners could help us. We have some pictures to share real quick. Alex, if you could do that. Okay, so this is the map, and this star is where we are. This is southwest, south to Multnomah Village, and the radius is about 8 to 10 miles here. That's how we hear the airplanes, and as you can see, they're all crossing our area, which is greatly affecting us. So next picture.
I'm sorry, we're not seeing the display, and I would say that if you have those and your testimony,
Okay.
they can be submitted and we'll have an opportunity to view them, but we are not seeing them at this point.
Yeah, okay, just a second. Let me do this real quick. Here. Okay, screen 1. Okay. Can you see this now?
Yes, we can, and I hope, I do want to make sure that we can stay within our time constraints as well.
We'll just go through this real quick. So you see the star is where we are, and these are the airplanes, all different directions with the intersection and the hub. And then if you click next button here, so you can see how they all going from south. This is the east flow, this is the frequency of it, and they're all going through our area. So click next. So this is the east flow again. So we were wondering why it's flying from, so here making this turn, and this is what's making it fly through our area. Why it's not going straight from here to here, or maybe further north and closer to the airport and make the loop. So all these kind of questions that we have. This is the FedEx, very loud, again, flying through our area. This is the video we would show you how loud it is. So we were told that the flight paths are efficient, but see, how is it efficient here when it could fly straight like right there. It's not efficient. It's flying through us. This is also flying through us. How is it efficient when it could fly straight here, avoiding our area? This is Hawaii could fly here, you know, on a loop, and it's again flying through our area for some reason. We don't understand why. Same picture here, different kind of airplanes. This is our Air Academy flying over our area, private airplanes. This is some service we understand, but you know, if we have such services ordered, then they should have mufflers or some kind of noise abatement installed. And they don't. It's all noisy. This is a private one where the U-turn in our area. Also, we don't understand why it's doing this. So that's all.
Okay.
This is my
Thank
how my sky looks like now. It's, you know, there is no live spot on my sky. It's all in the stripes now. I don't know what I'm breathing anymore. Well, that's all I had. Thank you for listening. Hopefully we can get this going somewhere and have it considered. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. It's noted. And again, I would ask that if there are any materials you would like to forward to Commissioner, please feel free to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We will move on to the agenda. I wanted to ask if any commissioner wants a presentation of the consent item that appeared on the agenda. And just for your recollection, that item is the equipment procurement contract for the Dredge Oregon pipe procurement for 2022. And this is out of the navigation division. Hearing none, I would call for a motion and a second to approve the consent item.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Pam, would you please administer our roll call?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Zumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
All right, thank you. All right, now I'd like to call on Dan Pippinger to introduce our next agenda item. Dan?
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you, Commissioner Alexander. This is a request for the second reading and enactment of the Port of Portland Ordinance number 478-R, which amends Ordinance 448 regarding customer facility charges on rental car transactions at PDX. This ordinance provides for limited circumstances under which the CFC or customer facility charge may not be charged on rental car transactions, and defines peer-to-peer car sharing as a rental car activity at PDX. And you'll recall we had the first reading at last month's commission. This is the second reading, and I'll ask Steve Kester, the Senior Manager of Commercial Landside, to present the second reading.
Good morning. Next slide, please. Okay. So I'm here today to give a summary and second reading and enact Ordinance number 478-R that amends Port Ordinance 448 regarding customer facility charges, CFCs, on rental car transactions at PDX. Next slide. As a summary, there are peer-to-peer vehicle sharing companies such as Avail and Turo are operating at PDX without a permit. They have no physical presence at PDX as they operate through an online app-based platform where customers pick up and drop off vehicles in one of the parking facilities. However, they are competing directly with the rental car companies that do have a presence at PDX and do have an agreement with the port. Our existing Ordinance 448 requires rental car companies at PDX to collect and remit a customer facility charge on customer transactions. Although the peer-to-peer companies are currently not collecting or remitting those CFCs, but they're also not using the CFC-funded facilities such as the rental car center and quick turnaround. Next slide, please. So the Ordinance 478-R will amend Ordinance 478 to define and include vehicle sharing companies as a rental car company. The ordinance will eliminate the requirement to collect the CFC on rental car transactions conducted at off-site airport facilities. These facilities will not include those adjacent to the airport terminal, such as the short-term garage. There will not be facilities funded by the CFC, such as the rental car center, and there will be areas that are designated by the port for rental car transactions. Ordinance 478R enables the port to enter into an operating agreement with peer-to-peer companies where the port can now regulate where they operate at PDX and collect a percentage of revenue, and they will prohibit their use of CSD-funded facilities. Next slide, please. So again, we were at commission last month to do the first reading and public hearing. We're here today to do the second reading and enactment. The ordinance will become effective November 11th, 2022, and we will spend the rest of this year and in the next year working with the companies to develop an agreement and have them here at PDX. Next slide. And again, we'll call for a second reading and enactment of Port Ordinance 478R, amending Port of Portland Ordinance 448 regarding customer facility charges on rental car transactions at Portland International Airport.
Great. Thank you very much. Do any commissioners have questions or comments?
My only comment is, again, I just want to commend the port for being creative and in thinking how to constructively work with different business models as they develop and as things evolve over time, so that we can continue to manage a competitive and appropriate set of services for people who experience the airport. So just want to say this is great work.
Thank you, Commissioner. Hearing no other comments, I ask Mr. Kester if you would please read ordinance number 478R by title only.
Yes, ordinance number 478R is an ordinance amending ordinance number 448 of the Port of Portland regarding customer facility charges on rental car transactions at the airport.
Great, thank you. I call for a motion and a second for approval of the Executive Director's recommendations to enact ordinance 478R. Is there any further discussion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, Pam, please administer the roll call.
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next agenda item, I'd like to ask Vince Granato to introduce it to Commission.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. We're here for another contract amendment. This one is for ZGF, our architect, to help us as we transition the project, and Curtis kind of referenced this. For this amendment here, it's for construction administration. We've had plenty of contracts with ZGF for design. But as Curtis referenced, we're really starting to transition the project here. We are not done with the roof yet. There's still quite a bit to go. But certainly the high risk portion of the roof move we have gotten past. And so that was really a big milestone here last week. So we have two more small things we're calling drawers that go in, and then we move to the west where we're not over any of the existing building. And so we're starting this transition of, okay, we've got now about 16 months left before we open, and starting to enclose the building and do all of the tenant improvement work that needs to be done. So we're really at this inflection point right now, and this is why we need the work with ZGF to help us as we get further into the design. So George has a couple of slides here and a couple of pictures of kind of the work that's been going on, but also this great video that our comms team put together. We're trying to start the conversation now, and the excitement around what that roof is going to look like. So they've done a fantastic job with it. So I'll let George take it from here and show you the video and then a few pictures of the work that we're doing. Then we'll get into the item itself.
Thanks, Vince. So as Vince and Curtis mentioned, this video is was released in social media yesterday. Will be played at the Hollywood Theater Micro Cinema starting Friday through the end of 22. Could you go to the next slide, please, which should be the video.
Flight PDX-NW now arriving at gate 2024.
We know you love the carpet, but soon you'll have a reason to look up. How do you take one of the most loved airports in the country and make it even better, even more Pacific Northwest?
Design it so it feels like the forest.
You start with lumber from sustainably managed forests in Oregon and Washington.
You source from tribal lands across the region, including community forests and small landowners.
Making sure to be able to trace the lumber back to its origins, from forest to frame.
We come up with a way to make these big, beautiful beams.
You hire thousands of skilled tradespeople to build a 9-acre roof right on the airfield. Together we build something we hope you'll be proud of, a true testament to the spirit and people of the Pacific Northwest. We can't wait for you to see.
Now to the mundane part of PDX Next. So today we're asking for an amendment of ZGF's contract for about $11.7 million to predominantly provide for construction administration services for the T-Corp project. Next slide. So 2022 has really been about prepping for the roof and installing the roof. And I've got a couple of images here to show. As Curtis and Vince mentioned, we're really making a lot of progress on it. Kind of one other thing I'd like to point out is we did bid packages F.3, which is most of the interior finishes. About a month and a half ago, we got the results back in. The construction team is still working through the bid leveling to see the actual numbers, but had very good coverage. I think there were 18 packages that were open for anybody to bid on, and I think most of those had at least 2, if not more, bidders. There were a couple of just single bidders, and there were, I think, 7 or 8 packages that were set aside just for small businesses to bid, and all of those had at least 2 bidders. Some of them had up to 4 bidders. So we're really excited about the response we saw to the bid packages. Next slide. So here's a couple images. We run the images the end of the month. So at this point in time, you'll see module 5 going over the far south end of the terminal building. Since then, module 6, which is kind of mirrored what went on over Concourse D, is now installed at the bottom half of the terminal under Concourse C. So now the work, if you look out there today, would be around building the mechanical modules, right where the crane is, just to the north of the crane. They're building mechanical modules. All of the really heavy major modules are over the terminal building, which really was a big concept for the project. Next slide, please. So here's the fab yard. Again, at the end of last month. At this point in time, you can see the drawer that Vince talked about there on the left side of the drawing. Actually, if you could go out there today, you'd see that drawer at about 55 feet in elevation. The SPMT, the self-propelled mobile transport that will move it into place, is being readjusted, and the plan is next week that drawer comes over as soon as some of the steel gets out of the way for the mechanical module, and then later in the month, the other drawer that's sitting there right kind of standalone by itself will get put in. So by the end of the month, maybe the 1st of November, the existing terminal building should be covered, and then we move to the west with the other section of the building. And then as we get into 2024, we do the same thing at the nodes. Next slide. So from a schedule perspective, we are on schedule for a May 2024 completion of phase 1, year-end 2025 completion of the nodes. From a commission perspective, we anticipate being back next month for the ground source award, towards the end of the year for the procurement of the TSA security lanes, and then next year we'll be back again for some of the ZGF contract amendments. Next slide. Actually, the first contract we presented to Commission on the project was all the way back 7 years ago for the Concept Services, September of 2015 for the ZGF contract. We've been back to Commission multiple times for ZGF contracts amendments from end of December in 2017 for schematic design projects. We then kicked off Concourse B as we went through 2018 and 2019, which has been operational for about a year now. 2019, then we really went through the detailed design development on the project, completed the design in 2021, which we came to Commission for approval for the final design, construction phasing, and some construction administration. And now we're on our way to really the construction administrative aspects of the project from now to the end. Next slide. This contract amendment is in our budget. It was planned. It's just we've made the decision not to award a huge contract administration because it kind of phases as the project goes on. So this contract should get us through really all of the final value engineering type of activities we're working on and construction administration until about March of next year. We anticipate being back to Commission next March for contract administration through phase 1. Probably May of 2024 for construction administration phase 2, and maybe a closeout in December of 2025. Next slide. Overall project budget is maintaining the $2.15 billion that we presented a few months ago. Contingencies tracking at the $110 million. As I said, all of this contract amendment was budgeted within our overall project and approval from the airlines. From a funding source, this is all Airline Cost Center, including the $18.4 million FAA grant we received for the ground source system. The construction is still tracking to about the 20% small business participation goal. We'll have a much better update on that when we finally level all of the bids for F.3. From a design perspective, the ZGF team is running at about 10%, and this contract should maintain that number. Next slide. To date, Commission has approved about $172 million for ZGF. With this amendment, they'll be up to just about $184 million. Next slide. Staff recommends approval of the Executive Director's recommendation. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from Commission? And please just chime in. I'm having a hard time sort of seeing hands raised. And
so, Michael, I'm going to chime in here. As an engineer and trained nerd, it is great to see this progress. It's just, the kind of thing that excites me. And also, I think kudos to the team that this is a request within budget. Really, congratulations to the entire team in terms of execution and safety and cost control.
Thank you.
I do have one question, if I could.
Please, Commission.
Just a question on pricing in general. Have you seen increases, or have they stayed in line with the initial projections as you set out, or are there price escalations as the project is continuing throughout the rest of the time period, or have they committed so I'm just trying to ascertain what level of commitment to price or what kind of price risk there is from here to the end of the contract?
So if you look at the amount of uncommitted cost in the project, really that we've got about $160 to $170 million worth of contracts they'll be releasing. We just got the bid pricing on about 150 to 155 of that. If you give us a month, we can report next month on how it's tracking, but we haven't opened all those and leveled them to see where they are. I haven't heard of any concerns, but we still haven't seen the final pricing yet.
Got it. Thank you.
Are there other questions from commission? Commissioner Sampat, your hand is still up. I don't know if it's still up or if you've got an additional question. There we go. Thank you. All right, hearing none. I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Pam, would you administer our roll call?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Sampat,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item, and I asked Dan Pippinger if he would introduce it.
Thank you. Good morning again, Commissioners. This item is to request approval to award a public service improvement contract, a public improvement contract for maintenance to berth 503 at Terminal 5. Potash is what's moved across that dock. It's quite corrosive and requires a high level of maintenance. And this work is required by contractual terms of our lease with our tenant, Portland Bulk Terminals, which exports potash from Saskatchewan, Canada, to approximately 40 countries around the world, mainly used in agricultural fertilizer and also in industrial applications. Here to present the item is Eric Forsyth, Engineering Project Manager, to recommend the award of the contract. Eric?
Great. Thank you, Dan. Next slide, please. Morning, everyone, commissioners. This is requesting commission action to approve an award of a public improvement contract to Stellar J Corporation for the Berth 503 rehabilitation project in the amount of approximately $5.5 million. Next slide, please. This slide is a map showing where Berth 503 is. It's in the Rivergate Industrial District. Maintenance tasks on the berth are varied and cover the entire facility. Next slide, please. We summarized the contract-specific scope of work in the agenda item. This is just a summary of that summary. Essentially, we're removing and replacing several precast concrete deck panels, repairing and replacing other concrete items on the berth, refurbishing the zinc coating, rehabilitating the deck, and refurbishing the fender panels that help us berth the ships that go into and out of the facility. Next slide, please. Here is a summary of our schedule. We've been designing this project since 2021, bidding this summer. Commission action is now for the public improvement contract. We anticipate completing construction about this time next year. It'll take us about 12 months to finish our scope of work. Next slide, please. Budget and funding are as shown here. Our contingency is currently holding at about 14%, which is appropriate for the risk level of the project and the scope of work ahead of us. General fund is the funding source. And going into bidding, our small business participation goal was set at 10%, and Stellar J has committed to 10.1%. So we're looking pretty good there. Next slide, please. Staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Are there any questions or comments from commission?
I have one question. How much of that contract constitutes an environmental mitigation when you're, working in the river. I assume that that's a part of the activities and the contract that's accounted for within that amount.
Yeah, that's a good question. We are not actually working in the river. We're all above ordinary high water. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has required us to submit a permit for this work, which we have done and we have received. So our authorities with jurisdiction are well aware of our activities, and we're in compliance with those requirements.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
I did have one quick question. I'm sorry. There was another comment from Commission, please.
Yes, thanks, Mike. Given the corrosive nature of potash, is this a kind of regular expense item at some periodic time, or is this a one-off?
That's another good question. This is not a one-off. This is work that is required to meet our lease obligations with Portland Bulk Terminals. It's set at a normal frequency, and this work meets that frequency. We can also expect future projects to meet our lease obligations up to 2036. When Portland Bulk Terminals takes over maintenance.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the update.
You're welcome.
And my question was along the same line, so I don't feel the need to repeat it. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm sorry, someone else? Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Pam, would you administer the roll call?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. I asked Dan Walters if he would introduce our next agenda item.
Thank you, Commissioner Alexander, and good morning, Commissioners. This agenda item requests your approval to award 4 personal services on-call geotechnical services contracts that we use on an as-needed basis. The port requires geotechnical services throughout our facilities. These services can be used to perform seismic analysis, determine pavement rehabilitation approaches, foundation design, and various studies that we require. We use on-call services contracts to improve the efficiency in the way we deliver our projects. They are typically used on smaller scopes of work that we require on a very frequent basis, and it keeps us from having to go through the cost and time associated with individual competitive solicitations each time we require such services. Here today to present the agenda item is Chris Edwards, our engineering project manager.
Thank you, Stan, and good morning. Next slide, please. Today, I'm requesting approval to award 4 geotechnical on-call service contracts to GRI, Shannon & Wilson, Geodesign, and Cornforth Consultants. Next slide, please. This shows the details for each of those contracts. They will have a term limit of up to 5 years, and any of these contracts can be used at our facilities, and they'll be done as individual task orders. We will define the scope of work, the schedule for that work, associated compensation, and a small business goal. These consultants recognize we do have a 20% goal. However, for each of those task orders, we'll negotiate them individually for that small business goal. Next slide, please. Stan mentioned some of the elements that we use this work for. Again, building studies, we do seismic analysis, a lot of pavement designs for our facilities. So some of the elements there. Next slide. Here is our overall schedule. Again, the bulleted item to your left, or bolded item, I should say, is what's before you today, and these contracts will be available for 5 years. Next slide, please. The staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendation. That's it.
I had to go on mute. Every Wednesday, my neighbor's landscaper comes and turns on his equipment, and he just arrived. I was disappointed he was late. He's usually here by 10. All right, are there any questions or comments from commission?
I have one. I'm just curious, is there a roadmap that you have for geotechnical review, or there are priorities that have been established to do those kinds of assessments, or maybe just an overview of what is your kind of routine work that's done to assess this type of activity?
Make sure I'm understanding the question. You know, typically when we get a project, we'll look at what do we need? What's the type of work we're needing at the facility or for what we're trying to perform? And then actually we'll look at each of these consultants and see what their skill sets are, you know, if they have one versus another. And then we'll outreach with them and get the scope of work. And then again, as I mentioned, the compensation schedule for doing that work. But you know, does that hit your question, or what?
I think if Chris, let me step in for a second. I think I understand the question. In our planning and development group, we have an asset management team. And that asset management team will use these contracts also to do pavement assessments. And so these companies will go out, do pavement assessments, and then we'll determine, you know, what projects do we need to look at depending on what the condition of those pavements might be. So there is a regular assessment that's being done on a very routine basis to understand the condition of our facilities.
And because I assume that these would reveal potential vulnerabilities and impact your capital project plan and the related priorities. Is that
correct? That is correct. I think did that get at it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Are there other questions from commission? All right, hearing none, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the executive director's recommendations.
So moved.
Yeah.
Thank you. Pam, would you call the roll?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Semput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Stan, I'm going to ask if you would also introduce our next agenda item.
Certainly. Thank you, Commissioner Alexander. This agenda item requests approval to award 2 contracts in support of the Navigation Division pipe barge replacement. The first contract is an equipment procurement contract for the new pipe barge itself. And then the second contract is a lease agreement to finance the new pipe barge utilizing the port's master loan agreement with Bank of America Leasing and Capital. We use the pipe barge to transport dredge pipe up and down the Columbia River. And the current pipe barge that we have, believe it or not, is vintage 1924. So it's about 100 years old and it's past its useful life. These 2 contracts are to support the Port of Portland's contractual dredging agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers, under which we are reimbursed 100% of our costs, including the acquisition and lease costs of this new pipe barge. Here today to present the agenda item is Ryan Milkowski, Engineering Project Manager. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you, Stan, and good morning, Commissioners. Next slide, please. As Stan had mentioned, we're looking for approval on 2 items on this project. The first is approval to award an equipment procurement contract to Diversified Marine for the amount of just under $4 million for the actual pipe barge. And the second is we're looking for approval to enter into a financial agreement with a subsidiary of Bank of America to provide the full project funding, including the administrative costs for the amount of a little over $4.5 million. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the existing pipe barge. Like Stan mentioned, it was built in 1924 using riveted steel construction. We've been able to make use of it and keep it afloat through maintenance and periodic repair, but it's kind of outlived its useful life and it needs to be repaired, or excuse me, need to be replaced. We're looking to get a new welded steel barge that's 120 feet by 40 feet. Next slide, please. Here's an image of the schedule of the project. If we get approval today, we'll issue a contract in early November, and it'll take roughly 1 year to fabricate the new barge, and would be ready for use by the Navigation Division in November of 2023. Next slide, please. So here's kind of a breakdown of the project funding. Like I mentioned, the barge itself is a little under $4 million. We've got some administration costs and design costs in there, as well as we're doing about 12% contingency on that, which is kind of recommended given the complexity of this project. So the overall loan will be a little over $4.5 million. The funding source will be a loan that will be reimbursed by the U.S. Army Corps. In terms of small business goals, because this is funded 100% by the U.S. Army Corps, we have to follow their requirements. We're not allowed to actually set a specific hard goal on that. But the vendor we're using, Diversified Marine, is a self-certified small business through the SBA. Next slide, please. In terms of the actual reimbursement agreement, this will be, like I said, a little over $4.5 million. Will be funded through a loan secured under the Port's Master Loan Agreement with a subsidiary of Bank of America that was competitively bid in 2013. This is an agreement we've used before in other projects, so it's nothing new. It worked rather well the last time and it will again this time. And we're looking to get the U.S. Army Corps will reimburse the port, including interest over a 10-year loan agreement. And then we will be able to actually retroactively seek reimbursement of any of the design costs we've already spent so far. So ultimately, there will be no net cash impacts on the port's general fund. Next slide, please. And staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Milkowski. Are there any questions or comments from Commission?
Only I'm impressed. I'm impressed that that they've been able to keep their equipment operational for that line. I assume that piece of equipment is fully depreciated. So nice work on maintaining the equipment.
Thank you. The Navigation Division's done a really good job on maintaining their equipment. They've got a lot of older barges that are scheduled to be replaced soon.
Yeah.
I did have one question. I do understand the guidance from the feds in terms of the small business set aside, but the terminology that was used is that the vendor is a self-described SBE. Are they recognized as that by the port as well?
They are recognized by the port as that for federally funded projects. They are not like COVID certified as anything like that based on, like, say, state requirements, but for these federally funded ones, they are.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the self-described was not exclusive of recognition of that by the port as well.
Correct, right. It's only based on these 100% federally funded projects.
All right, thank you. Are there other comments or questions from Commission? All right, hearing none, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
So moved. I'll second, Rochelle.
Fantastic, thank you. Pam, would you administer our roll call?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi, Commissioner Nemi,
I believe she said in a
And-
message that she was going to be away.
okay, thank you. Samput
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. All right, I'd like to call on Antoinette Chandler to introduce our next agenda item.
Thank you, Commissioner Alexander. Good morning, Commissioners. Each year, we come before the board to readopt our investment policy. And over the past year, we have taken a deep dive look into our policy, and we've made several changes to the policy to align it with requirements as outlined in the Oregon Revised Statutes. And so some of these key changes to various sections within our investment policy include standard of care, our discussion around a transaction with counterparties, suitable and authorized investments, and also a section that we added around sustainable investment section. And so we have here today, I'd like to introduce you to Travis George, who's our capital finance and debt and investment manager. And he's going to walk you through some of these key revisions. And with that, I will turn it over to Travis.
Thank you, Antoinette. Good morning, everyone. As Antoinette said, I'm here to kind of give an overview of the revisions that we have made and are suggesting be adopted to our investment policy. This is a result of a collaboration and a lot of work from staff internally, as well as an external consultant, PFM Asset Management. And in addition, we were able to share and incorporate, share with the state and incorporate recommendations from the state as part of this process. So next slide. Just to be totally clear about what this policy is related to, it really is the source of guidance for managing our investment portfolio. The port's cash and investment portfolio consists of operating and non-operating funds, capital funds, and bond proceeds. Though, as Antoinette said, we've made fairly significant changes to the policy. The fundamental foundation of the policy itself really remains the same as it always has been, which is in order of priority safety, or the preservation of capital, liquidity, or basically just making sure we have enough cash on hand to run the business, and return. So just ensuring that we're earning a reasonable and market-based yield on the investments that we make. Next slide, please. So we undertook this process really to kind of create a more robust policy, one that more closely conforms to the state of Oregon's guidelines that it publishes for local governments to use when crafting their investment policies. It has a sample policy that it shares. And we also wanted to add clarity, which we did throughout. As Antoinette mentioned, we also added a sustainable investing piece based on environmental, social, and governance, or ESG kind of framework. And really the overarching goal is to kind of build out a more robust treasury function as a whole at the port. And this policy and the revisions that we've made are really just sort of a first step in that direction. Please, next slide. So we've made, as I've said, quite a lot of changes, so I'm not going to go through one by one, but just wanted to give you a summary. We've added language that seeks to clarify the purpose, scope
objectives, roles and responsibilities, and things like that. Sometimes that was a new section or just maybe an added definition in a section. As Antoinette mentioned, we added a new standards of care section that has language about prudent decision-making, ethics, conflicts of interest, and authority and responsibilities. On the sustainable investing section that we added, I would just say as with a lot of these changes, it's a first step toward a direction that we are intending to go. So this is a section that will be built out to be, more sort of robust in the future. And then we added language clarifying and adding some new guidelines in terms of dealing and working with outside parties. Those parties include investment brokers, consultants, advisors, things like that. And this really sets us up to add or to start working with an investment consultant possibly in the future, which would really be a good step in helping us build out that ESG focus in the portfolio. We added language requiring an internal controlled document. This document will be reviewed annually. And we also now will be requiring a periodic audit of our investment program to ensure we're in compliance with our own policies, those internal controls, and state law. We also clarified and better defined the asset types that we're allowed to invest in, and we slightly modified the definition of how we calculate the maximum maturity of the portfolio. So I'll stop there in the summary. We can go to the next slide, which is the final slide. Happy to answer any questions, but our recommendation is that you adopt the investment policy number 6.1.2 as we have amended it.
Thank you very much. And I would ask if there are questions from commission or comments.
The comment I'd make is I'm glad that Antoinette and the executive director are being proactive in getting ahead of this and keeping this as an updated document. We had the opportunity to view some of the details in the executive meeting last month. So I commend you in kind of staying ahead of this.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. There are no other comments or questions. I would ask for a motion and a second to adopt the executive director's recommendation.
Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. There are no other questions. Pam, would you please administer the roll call?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And now I'd like to call on Dan Hippinger, who will introduce our final agenda item for today.
Thank you, and good morning again, Commissioners. This item requests approval of a one-year extension of a collective bargaining agreement between the Port of Portland and the Port of Portland Police Employees Association that represents our police sergeants, officers, clerks, and communications dispatchers. Between March and September of this year, the Port and the association discussed the possibility of extending our existing four-year contract that ran from 2018 to 2022, collective bargaining between the parties. And while we traditionally have negotiated a four-year agreement, both parties felt during this volatile economic period and while we were addressing staffing shortages that a one-year extension was most advantageous to both parties. Here to present the item is Blaise Lamphere, the Labor Relations Manager for the Port of Portland. Blaise?
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, Commissioners, Chair Alexander. Appreciate the opportunity to present this item. Next slide, please. Okay, I'd like to cover just briefly some of the highlights of this agreement. Also, this was a tentative agreement was reached with the union on September 23rd, and we were informed it was ratified on October 2nd. Wage increase, there are 3 here. There's 2 overall across the board, and then there's 1 specific to 2 classifications. The first wage increase, 4% retroactive to July 14th, 2022. That is the first day of the first full pay period of the month of July. Another across the board increase from 4% for January 12th, 2023, and a separate increase for the police clerks and police clerk assistant, which adds an additional 2% for those classifications in January. Some of the major things we have looked at and the key drivers here, CPIW, West-sized Class A cities, is the one that most closely mirrors what happens in the Portland market. We used to have an indicator that was the Portland-Salem index, but for the past several years, we have not had that reported from the USDOL, Department of Labor. In the most recent reporting for second half that came out in January was 6%, but the first half report for this index was 8.5, and the national was 9%. So it has been higher than it's been certainly in my entire career in public sector, which goes back 35 years. One of the other things that we're trying to do and accomplish with this is we are recommending a $7,500 bonus for all employees that are in paid status, except lateral hires with 2022 incentives. Like many other jurisdictions who are competing for these key public service, public sector positions, we sought to take advantage of the temporary exception we had here in Oregon during the state of emergency. That temporary exception allowed us to do vaccine incentives, hiring bonuses, and retention bonuses, but expired at near the end of September. By doing this, we acknowledge those who have stayed, frankly, and continue in their service to us in the Port of Portland and this community. And those laterals who received incentives, as I say, they are not included in this 75 as they have received incentives throughout and were front loaded. But by doing this, which functions as a retention bonus, we can continue to offer incentives throughout the next 12 months here in Oregon, regardless of whether there is a legal change or update to the Pay Equity Act. Next slide, please. So economically, the estimated financial impact of new dollars, which we like to show here, I would note that the total, the 1.744 million that you see there, over 40% of that would occur even if we granted no wage increase at all. So there are what effectively operate like fixed cost from PERS increases and healthcare increases that would occur regardless of this extension. The other piece of this is we have agreed with the union that we will be in bargaining for a successor agreement, which ideally looks more like the 3 to 4 year agreements we have seen. Hopefully we'll see some stabilization in the market and addressing our staffing issues during this period. As I said, a piece over 40% of that 1.744 million is effectively would occur regardless of what we did here. And that's important to keep in mind. So the across the board increases 1.3 million. The police clerks, I broke them out since they have that separate increase, 0.004 million. The $7,500 bonuses would be one time to the group, as I say, functioning as a retention bonus, and the lateral hire incentive continuation over the next 12 months. We have an estimate there for 5 new hires that would go up accordingly. If we had 10 new hires, it would be 0.08 million. Next slide, please. So the executive director recommendation, we seek approval to enter into a 1-year collective bargaining agreement extension with the Port of Portland Police Employees Association. Are there any questions?
I do have a question. So when the port is doing benchmarking, I'm just curious where the port stands in terms of how the Port of Portland police wages and benefits compare to, let's say, the city of Portland, or I say competitive roles in the region. Could you just talk about that, just in terms of the competitive landscape and how the port thinks about that with respect to this workforce?
Typically, we look at more mid-sized police departments. In the metro area, we're going to look more at a Beaverton or Hillsborough, that sort of thing. There's not an easy equation under PECPA because it applies to all of us, and PECPA is written as if we are all cities with police officers, essentially. But we still have to follow that, and so that's the primary thing we look at, and we've looked at over the years, are more the mid-sized departments tend to be the ones that we're mostly in competition for. But realistically, we're in competition with all public sector.
Blaise, can you talk just a little bit about like how we stack up in terms of, I think the question was about whether our compensation and benefits are in similar level with those we compare to.
That's my understanding, is this puts us on a more competitive ground, certainly, and we should be able to compete more effectively than we have to date. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
We have a few hands up, but let me go to Commissioner Strader first, and then Commissioner Samper.
Thank you. How many positions do we currently have open? Kind of alluded to possibly 4 or 8. Is that correct?
Yeah, I said that the initial estimate was done from finance for 5, for filling 5 vacancies. We have more than that open. That's what it says. If there's 10, double that number that's there. If we had 10 incentives over the coming year, we have 9 current vacancies for police officers, and we have 4 vacancies for communication dispatchers.
And I also take it that this would help with us to be more competitive to potentially fill those positions. It sounds like it's challenging for everybody in this current environment. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Samper?
Sorry, there. Now I'm unmuted. Piggyback on the question that Stuart asked. What is the turnover or attrition rate in this group of officers or this classification?
I don't know the attrition figure off the top of my head. That's certainly something I could get for you. My understanding is there's been a number of vacancies, though, for officers throughout the period, throughout the, I would say, the pandemic period, frankly.
Commissioner Sampat, let me add on that we have had a large number of vacancies. We're making really good progress in filling those. I don't know the number either, but we will get that to you. But I will say we're on a positive trajectory in filling those positions, and we feel very confident both with the excellence of our department and this 1-year extension that we can continue that path. So I feel like we've turned a corner over the past year in hiring, and we want to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, this has definitely been a tough environment in terms of hiring in any field. The other question is, when does the 3 to 5 year contract negotiation start? Is there a kind of when does the starting gun get fired on that one?
We will start no later than January 20th. By this agreement, we actually spelled that out, that we would begin bargaining on that successor agreement no later than January 20th. This goes through June 30th of 2023. If we can start earlier with the mutual agreement of the parties, we would do so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Schrader, I saw your hand go back up. Was that a follow-up question?
Yeah, but it got answered. Actually, Dane answered it for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Are there additional comments or questions from Commission? All right, hearing none, I would ask for a motion and a second to accept the Executive Director's recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Pam, would you take us through the roll call?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Luther,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
Samput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everyone for the attention that you brought to a very full and robust agenda and discussion. And as of this moment, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.